Donnie, you ever watch Beavis and Butthead in your earlier days?
I sure did. I probably spent way too much time during the summers, but yes, sir.
Yeah, so I never saw it when it was originally on. I listened to other people talk about it, and I learned to do, or kind of learned to do the voices. But my son, it was very interesting because it came out a couple of years ago, I think. Or maybe it's just 2023. They did a series of new episodes from it, and I couldn't believe that I found me, my wife, and my son watching Beavis and Butthead 20 some years after the show initially debuted on what was at MTV,
Yeah,
laughing when it used to make me cringe to think about my kids ever watching that show.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely not age appropriate for a little kid, but I can see where a teenager would find some humor in that.
Yeah. Well, if you get some time this summer, which you never have time, it seems, sit back and watch that. Again, we went into Siskel and Ebert of contractors, I guess. Donnie, this is the Carolina Contractor Show. My name is Eric Smith. I do inside sales with Home Builder Supply. Donnie is like big time. He's a general contractor. He owns Blanchard Building Company. Don't shake your head. He owns SureTop Roofing, and you can sometimes see him on TV. You can see him on Hulu, and I guess soon A&E Network. Oh, is that in the fall that's going to pop?
Yep. So A&E Network originally produced the show, and the film crew was all from A&E Network. But we finished filming last August, and Hulu swooped in and bought They bought the rights to 3 different shows from A&E Network, and ours was one of those. So when they bought the rights, that meant that they had the rights to debut the show instead of A&E. And I think the stipulation they had in place is that it'll still drop on A&E, which will be a lot more exposure than Hulu. But it dropped February 7th on Hulu, and 6 months later, which would be around October, it's supposed to drop on A&E. And my understanding is it'll rerun after those 10 straight weeks. It'll rerun for the next year or so. But really exciting, and I don't know what's going to come from that, but all of it's a good thing.
It's kind of cool. So if you want to see the Carolina Contractor Show in action, we have approximately 37 seconds, I think, out of something that took us, 8 hours to film at a radio station. And then you're in every episode, and your son's in it. Who else? Is your dad in it?
No, yeah, my dad, my brother, my son, my daughter. One daughter did not make a cameo, but she could care less. I tried. And anyway, but yeah, got the whole family in there multiple times. I think episode 8, it's All in the Family is the title, and everybody gets a little piece of the action. Pop's got a speaking part, and so, that's the nicest I've ever heard him talk to anybody, so it's pretty cool there. But it was, very good experience, and I'm glad I did it. I will say that for anybody that ever gets a chance to do anything like that for a TV network, it's a lot of work, and you're marching to the beat of a production crew schedule. A lot of times we didn't get our call sheet for the next day until 7 o'clock that night. And where it made it tough is that I had about 5 other custom builds going and a few roofing crews running every day. So having your finger on the pulse for all that, along with 7 flips for the TV show simultaneous, is almost an impossible task. So I'd say about 80 plus hours a week is what I had to work to pull all that off.
And what we're talking about is the show 50/50 Flip. And again, it debuted like 4 months ago, back in April on Hulu, and it's going to be coming up this fall on A&E Network. So if you want to check that out and see Donnie in action, and even see, like I said, just a few seconds of our show on the air in the radio station, you'll be able to find that.
Yeah, but we're on season 2, by the way. We're on season 2. Everybody asked me that they don't think about going to season 2. Season 1, they only pulled off about 6 episodes because, of course, they had a different contractor, and I don't know. They made it look pretty good, but season 2 is definitely much better.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. That is important, because then they see a general contractor on season 1 and go, "Well, who's that? That doesn't sound like Donnie." But again, we're not pushing this show exclusively. What we do want to talk about today on the Carolina Contractor Show is some things about your house, and we're going to focus on summer, but we like to say that we're the sports center of DIY and homeowners, because that's what we focus on, is your house. And again, Donnie being a general contractor and building them, and updates and supplies and materials and things like that. The website, thecarolinacontractor.com, is where you want to start. You can download past episodes. We got links to the YouTube site, so you can watch these shows. You can find information on the show when we talk about specific topics. And if you've got an idea for a show, please let us know. Someone you think we should interview, let us know. We love to do that. Also, I can't believe I almost forgot, Donnie, the very popular Ask the Contractor button. You hit that. If you have a question about your house, Donnie gets them and he answers those. He'll usually respond to you directly, but then we sometimes do a questions only show, which I think we're a little behind on. We'll have to do a new one of those in the near future. But today I want to talk about something we're experiencing at the recording of the show, which is very hot weather here in the middle of June, talking about triple digit indexes. And what we tend to do is stay inside and run our AC and try to stay cool. And one thing happens, and that is your utility bill tends to go up. And so we thought, hey, let's talk about some ways you can maybe lower that utility bill, because when you get inflation and you have grocery prices and everything's up high, cutting $10 here, $15 here, $20 there can make a big difference. And there's some little things you can do that a lot of them don't take any really new investment, or it's a small investment that can have an impact on that. So Donnie, let's dive right in. First step someone can do to lower their cooling expenses.
Well, it really all starts with insulation. That's the biggest part of the equation. And if your house is poorly insulated, chances are your AC unit never can catch up to that called for temperature on your thermostat. So that means that if it can't cycle off until the sun goes down, that's a lot of wear and tear on your unit. And if the same thing's happening when we have a cold snap in the winter, that reduces the lifespan of that unit tremendously. So I'd say insulation is probably the most important thing. And what goes along with insulation is air sealing. I don't think that for years people put an emphasis on the air seal part of it, but when your return kicks on, it's pulling air from anywhere it can get. And it's sort of like electricity takes the path of least resistance, and that return pulling air, if you have leaks or gaps around your doors and windows, that's where it's going to pull that air in. And not only is it pulling in the hot air, it's pulling in air with high humidity ratio. So basically that means that when your system's trying to cool that air down, it's fighting way harder than it has to fight, because you're constantly introducing that outside air. And say that the return is located in a room that's close to the south facing elevation of your house. The south facing elevation gets the most sun exposure. So that's going to be the hotter rooms that it has to contend with. And again, it all goes back to the insulation and the air sealing. If you're insulated well, and you have the proper seal around your doors and windows that comes along with a lot of the houses in new construction, then you're in much better shape than what would be found in an older home.
And insulation is a permanent upgrade. It's not a temporary fix. So you can do that any time of year and you'll reap the benefits season after season.
That's exactly right. And a lot of people shy away from doing insulation, and they do upgrades on their house that you can see before they do the insulation. But that's probably the best selling point, is that insulation, it's there. It doesn't degrade. It doesn't have a lifespan when you put it in place. And especially if you're talking about spray foam, we'll get into that a little later. But it's definitely the gift that keeps on giving, because it will bring your utility bills down faster than any other thing that you can do to the house. But and when I rate insulation, I usually say, hey, insulation is for efficiency, and the air distribution is another thing that helps out, and that's more of a comfort thing. But if you have, say you have a unit located in your crawl space and it's towards one side or the other, because crawl spaces are usually on a slope, and you want to put the unit in the tallest part of the crawl space. So the lay of the lot will dictate that in most circumstances. But if you have the room that has the supply line the furthest away from the air handler, then it's not a bad idea, if you have an HVAC service person out there, to say, hey, can you check the air distribution? And they have something that will check the CFMs coming out of each supply register, and they can install a damper on that supply that will choke off some of the air to the rooms that are closer to that air handler, and it'll push more air to the rooms that are further away. So that air distribution, especially if that room further away is one of those southern facing rooms that we just mentioned earlier, that's everything. So if you get the right insulation in place and get your air distribution dialed in, I think that's the best case all the way around. And while we're talking about that, I'll get into heat transfer, and I won't go too deep on this, but you've got convective and conductive heat transfer. And basically one is caused by air pushing on your house, and then the other is caused by just the surface of your house, the surface area outside warming up, and that heat passing through the walls. But again, that goes back to insulation, because the heat passing from outside of your house to the inside. The effect is called thermal bridging, is the proper term. But the insulation breaks up that thermal bridge, so it won't let that heat pass through easily, that is. And if you want to do a quick check on your insulation, the minimum for your walls is an R13, but a R15 will fit in a regular 2x4 cavity. Kind of hard to check the insulation in the walls unless you just know, unless you have an area that you maybe have an exposed insulated wall in the garage, or on the attic side where you can see what's in there. But under the house, it should be an R19, and the current code for the attic is an R38.
And not long ago, we did a whole show on spray foam. And I don't want to scare people thinking, hey, I thought you were going to talk about some easy fixes here. As you said, we can get to spray foam in just a minute, but little stuff that you can do. Windows, it's the number one source of loss of heat or cool, depending on the time of the year. What are the cheap fixes on that someone can do?
So with a window, if you're handy, you could go room by room, and this might take you a few weekends, but they have low expansion spray foam, and the key word there is low expansion. If you put regular great stuff or what have you from the big box store, it is high expansion. It's going to really blow up, and it will almost crush your windows. You'll never be able to open those again. So the low expansion spray foam is a much less aggressive version, and that does a lot. And you would basically have to pop the casing off of your windows, and the window skirt and the window apron, those are kind of hard to take off if your windows are trimmed out like that. So the sides and the top are probably the most important, because when they set those windows, they're making a hard connection to that rough opening on the framing on the bottom. But the sides always have the gap, and the top always has a gap. And so if you felt comfortable to pop your window casing off, just 3 pieces per window, and do the sides and the top with low expansion spray foam, maybe put all those back, take a day, trim nailer and put all that back. That makes a huge difference. Same thing applies to your exterior doors. And when I say that, it really causes your HVAC system to work a lot less hard. A heat pump, and people get confused when you're talking about an air conditioner that's named a heat pump. I know it sounds crazy, but a heat pump works either way. Your house loses heat in the winter and it gains heat in the summer. And that heat pump is pulling the warm out of the air. So it's pumping the heat out of the air to give you cool air inside. And I believe that the rule of thumb is it normally cools the air down that's going into the return by about 15 or 20 degrees. So that means that if you turn your AC off and go on vacation and you come back and your house is 80 degrees, don't expect it to get down to 70 very fast, because it has to cycle all that hot air through and cool it down by 20 degrees at a time. And it's just really hard for your system to catch up in a quick manner. So pretty cool thing that I did a while back, and about a long time ago, I guess, way before I had children, because I don't have this kind of time anymore. But I made a spreadsheet, and I showed that if you make some of these improvements to your house, just how you can save just $100 a month on your utility bills. And the cool thing that I found is when you put the square footage in there, you can save on, say, a 1,200 square foot house. It's pretty easy to get your utility down by your utilities down by about $100 a month. But if you go into a 4,000 square foot house built in 1960, they have unreal utility bills. It's not out of the question to lower their bills by $300 or $400 a month. And when you put that number in there and you project that out over the life of a 30-year mortgage, I used to tell people, if you don't build efficiently, you can either pay for the house once or you can pay for it twice, because the savings, it was $100,000 over a 30-year mortgage on just $100 saved a month. And the price per kilowatt hour is only going to go up. Duke Energy has never came down on their bill as long as I've been paying it. So it just all makes perfect sense.
Just because, Donnie, you mentioned using foam and spray foam in the windows, real quick, can you summarize what spray foam is in the attic? Because we did a couple episodes actually not far back. If people want to go download and listen to the whole thing, I don't want to revisit it in too much detail, but at the website, thecarolinacontractor.com, you can find it. But give people kind of the 411 on spray foam insulation in the attic.
Yeah, so spray foam in the attic goes in the rafter cavities, and people often think that it goes on the back side of the ceiling, and I guess it could, but the proper way to do that is to spray it between the rafter cavities. So it's just underneath the roof deck. And basically they will fill up a cavity about 3/4 of the way. And I want to say for every inch of spray foam, the R value is about an R6. So, you're getting a lot more than what you would have with a batt insulation or a blown in cellulose. And the big deal with that is, you've been in an attic in the hot part of summer and it's sweltering. So, being that it's on the rafter cavities, the sun exposure is the greatest on the roof. So it heats up all that asphalt on the shingles, or even
Right.
if you have metal on the metal. And when I mentioned that thermal bridging, that same effect is happening on your roof. So it's heating up the roof. It's trying to get through the plywood, trying to get through the rafters. And of course, it makes its way into your attic. And traditional application of insulation, it's always over your ceiling. So that attic literally has no break between the sun exposure except for the wood and the shingles, but that almost makes it
Right.
worse because it closes the hot air in. So, it just spray foam in the attic solves everything. And I didn't do that when I built my house about 12 years ago. And that's the one thing when I renovate the next time, that'll be my first priority because spray foam insulations come down in price a lot. And important to know there is open cell insulation is what you want to use in the attic, because if you ever have a roof leak or anything, closed cell will not let that moisture pass through, and you won't know it until you have rotten plywood. So open cell is what to ask for.
Yes, definitely. And he made that clear. The example somebody told me, when it comes to spray foam, your roof versus insulation on the floor of the attic, is the difference between putting a heavy blanket against your window or sitting in the room with the blanket around you. The cold air is still going to come in, or the hot air, it doesn't matter. It's going to make it in your house. So go ahead and stop it at that source. And I'm with you. I would love to do a renovation and do spray foam, because what it not only does is lower your bill, it lengthens the life of your HVAC unit. It doesn't run
Yep.
as much. It's much more. It's
That,
really a win-win. The technology is there.
that's a really good example. You've never shared that with me, but I like that.
Okay, I'll
I
be honest. I made it up on the spot, but I didn't want to take credit in case it didn't go over well. But now that it did,
Right.
it's mine.
No, it sounds great. Yeah, I never thought about it that way. But the house that I always mention, the house I'm closing out, it has spray foam in the rafter cavities, and I've been in the attic recently, and that I want to say it was as much as 90 degrees outside, and it had to be in the high 70s in that attic, and that's just everything. And I just can't emphasize enough just the payback and how much it contributes to your HVAC system. The air handler is going to last longer if it's located in the attic, and all the ductwork, you don't have anything sweating or from the difference in temperatures there. It's good all the way around.
All right, well, let's get in some little fixes people can do. We talked about, you can put weather stripping and caulking and whatnot around windows, because we don't want to make it all about making a significant investment. There are things you can do right now. Um, we've always talked about, Donnie, programmable thermostats. I thought I was the last one on the train, but I found a government statistic, that
Mm-hmm.
only half of homes in the U.S. have a programmable thermostat, which means they probably have either the old mercury switches, or they just have one that's
Digital.
might be digital, but you can't do any programming with it. And I priced them out, and the average cost for a digital programmable um, thermostat is about $125. If I installed mine myself, and trust me, if I can do it, it ain't that hard. But if you'd rather have a pro do it, you'll find them put them in, two of them if you have a twin system, couple $100. So talk about a $350 investment, and you literally average $20 to $25 savings in a month. So your return on the investment of a thermostat is a year and change to put that
Oh,
in.
no doubt. Yeah, and it's nice if you get the ones that will talk to your Wi-Fi system. You can control those from your phone. So several advantages. If you do go on that vacation and turn your system down, you can have your house cool or warm when you get back. And what that means is you don't want to turn your system off during the day when you're at work, because it has to work that much harder to cool the whole house back off. So that kind of cancels out the efficiency. But if you just let it go a few degrees during the day and then program it to come back to the desired temperature, say around an hour before you come back home, then that's totally doable. And what that does is your HVAC system, it cycles off and on fewer times a day. And when you consider that, you save 3 to 6 cycles a day, and
Mm-hmm.
multiply that over a 15-year lifespan of a HVAC system, you may get an extra couple years just from having a programmable thermostat.
Yeah, I never thought about the cycling on and off, that takes a shot to the system every time it fires back up. Uh, Now, I've mentioned this also before on previous shows. I don't do this for anybody but my own house, but I'm the ceiling fan install master. I put 7 ceiling fans in my house. 3 were replacements. The others were brand new installs. I love them. Do you have any in your house?
Oh yeah, everywhere.
Okay. So I think it's one of the best things to have during summer. We actually have one on the screened-in porch. That's not, when I want to stress, screened in. It's not environmentally controlled. And that makes a difference sitting on a hot summer day having a ceiling fan. You know the 2 directions, how to determine what time of year to use what direction of the propeller motion?
Isn't it counterclockwise to push the air down in the summer?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
I
you
didn't know if
want,
I had that backwards. I always have to look
no,
it
you
back
got
up
it
because
right.
I forget.
Yeah, it's got a little switch. People don't even know this. I was surprised that your ceiling fan has a switch to change the rotation. And what you're trying to do is either keep cool air down or pull warm air up and distribute it through the house. So having a ceiling fan on in the winter is beneficial, but definitely make sure you have one on. Use it. It's okay to turn the speed up. Some people have them really kind of just slow. I don't think that does anything. You turn the ceiling fan on medium speed and you have it set in the right direction in the summer, it's an instant impact on a room. It will cool a room down by a few degrees. And again, it means your system doesn't have to run nearly as hard. You ever put
You
one
know,
in?
yeah, I have, and I didn't like it. It's not. It's too many pieces and parts. It's like a piece of furniture from IKEA. When you open it up, it's like you're thinking, how am I going to do this? It's Legos for grown-ups, you know. Um, Food for thought. So say you live on a slab and you have your air handler and everything in the attic, so you're blowing the air out of the ceiling, or say your air handler is in the crawl space on crawl space foundation and your air's coming from the registers in the floor. I wonder how that impacts the fan direction.
You know, I have not thought about it because I have ceiling fans in both levels of my house. And yeah, the ground floor, the registers are on the floor, and on the second
Floor,
floor on the ceiling.
ceiling. Yep.
Whatever. Yeah, they would be called floor registers if they're on the floor. Um, I don't know. I'll have to look that up. I don't know if it would
Yeah.
have an effect. I guess once the cold air is in the room, the goal is to keep it down.
There you go.
So
There you go.
maybe it doesn't matter, and cold air would fall anyway. We're getting into physics and stuff that I'm not smart enough to talk about. All right, well then bail me out here, Donnie. What's something else we can do?
Well, that's on the cheap, and so that programmable thermostat and fan, both of those are 2 things that you have the minimal investment with a pretty significant impact. I'd say the only other thing that I would focus on is having some pretty good blinds and curtains.
Yeah.
If you're not a curtain person, they have things blackout blinds and blackout curtains, and I think if you were going to consider those, maybe entertain something like that on the south facing elevation. I hate to keep harping on that, but that's where most of your heat loss and heat gain takes place. And, well, heat gain, especially in the summertime, but blinds are a saving grace. I can sit in front of my window in the mornings in my living room, drinking my coffee, and you can put your hand up to the window there with the blinds open, and you can feel the heat when the sun is directly on that. And you can close
Right.
the blinds, and it basically does away with that. So there has to be something to it. Storm doors are another thing, and I have
Yeah.
a storm door on my back deck, and in the mornings I don't even open the back door, because when you do, you get wafted with really hot air, and so there's a lot going on between that insulated fiberglass door and that storm door right there. But definitely storm door can help, and I just think those programmable thermostat, fan direction, and blinds or curtains to block the direct sunlight are 3 easy, cheap things.
Also consider if you have a storm door that faces the sun, either in the morning or in the afternoon. We have one that faces the west, and you like to leave the solid core entry door open and leave the storm door closed so you can look out. But it lets in a lot of heat just that way. So if you have to give it up for an hour and shut the solid core door to keep the heat out even more, go ahead and do that, because there's times we'll be sitting at the kitchen table, have the entry door open, and the sun's coming in the late afternoon, and you're like, man, it's so hot in this room right now. Well, that thermal energy is still getting into your house, so you need to consider closing the main door for a little bit. But aside from that, I love a storm door, and I had mine installed by a pro, and it was the best investment I ever did. I'm a big proponent of the nice storm doors. speaking of the kitchen, this time of year, someone cooks a meal, especially if it's the oven. That's kind of an obvious appliance that generates heat, but a lot of appliances can generate heat and cause you to run your AC longer or increase your utility bill. What are some of the appliances we don't think about that do that?
Well, in all fairness, the appliances have improved so much in efficiency. You used to hear about Energy Star this and Energy Star that, where now I'd say everything is Energy Star compliant just about, because the energy code dictates that. And, they all pull so little electricity compared to what they used to, that's not as much of a problem as you would have had 15, 20 years ago. But refrigerators still generate heat, washers generate a little bit of heat, and your dryer generates heat. I will say this warning sign: if your laundry room gets excessively hot, dryers are they're made so that the air is supposed to make its way to the outside. So there's an exhaust line, and all that is put together with, HVAC equipment. So if your dryer is heating up your laundry room, you probably have a bigger problem. So, but it can increase the degree by, a degree or so. And I have a thermostat located pretty close to my laundry room, so I really have to watch that. But I would say that if there was a solution to that, and you do have older appliances, then maybe try to wash clothes. You don't have an option; you got to run your refrigerator all day long.
Right.
But maybe try to wash clothes, and not in the peak hours when your other systems aren't working as hard. It just makes sense that you should do that early in the morning or later at night.
I do want to address the dryer real quick. If your clothes aren't drying, we sometimes think the heating element must be bad. No, that can mean you're not getting the heat going out. You got to check the lint trap. And that kind of surprises me how many people don't even know they have a lint trap, let alone they should check it. You can get a backup of all that lint. Not only is it a fire hazard, but then it's not venting that air, that heat out. And that actually makes your clothes not dry correctly because there's no airflow going through it. So be aware, if your clothes seem to take 2 cycles to dry and they didn't, it doesn't mean you have a heating element issue. You might have a duct issue that's gotten backed up by lint.
I think you just called my son out on the radio show, but that's another story. I put something down as a quick tip, and I think we've talked about this in the past. We used to advise folks to, in terms of appliances, the one appliance that you could save money on is your water heater. So if you go out of town, we advise people to flip your breaker. And we've since been told by a couple of plumbers that may not be a great idea.
Yeah, it's there's a little bit of an opinion back and forth, but for the most part, they don't think there's a cost benefit by turning the breaker off, because you're still going to have to heat it back up. Number 2, if you have a little bit of an older water heater system, they don't like to necessarily be turned off, cool off, and then restart. And sometimes you can have algae or other things start to grow when the temperature of the water heater drops below 120. And then when you turn it back on and start flushing the system, you're going to send it down the pipes. Also, everyone that I've talked to so far, which would be all 3 of them, said they don't know of any true benefit of turning it completely off, but some of the newer ones have vacation mode, which drops the temperature down. It might save you a few pennies, but there's no consensus that it's a good thing. It could potentially cause more harm than good by turning off your water heater completely when you go on vacation.
Wait. Okay. Question for you.
All right.
You're saying that on the newer models, they have an efficiency mode or vacation mode where you push the button and it just allows the water to be warm and not hot. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so everybody listens to the show. Eric's pet peeve is when somebody says hot water heater, because you don't heat hot water, it's already hot.
Right.
So I think what you just described to me would be labeled as a warm water heater.
Water heater. No, it's a hot water heater that doesn't get as hot when you don't want it to. I didn't catch that, but well done.
Warm water heater.
You will spend the rest of your life trying to counter that time that I said that about you, because now everybody else says that to you about calling it a hot water heater, and you just can't let that go without trying to get even with me. So we're going to move on. Go ahead.
It's everybody's favorite. People say that to me all the time. People who listen to the show every week, they always say, "Hey, man, you will never believe I heard such and such say hot water heater," and I corrected them right in front of everybody. So whatever sticks.
4-year-old joke, and it's still going. Hey, let's move outdoors.
Yep.
Obviously, you don't want to heat up the kitchen in the middle of the summer when it's 105 degrees and turn on the oven and do all those things. Of course, that would be a great time to grill out, but what are some other quick things you can do outside your house?
Okay, I'll start with neither one of these are cheap, but if you're going to make an upgrade to your house that's going to save you money in the long run, both of these work really well. And I'll start with the least expensive of the two. Radiant barrier. We've talked about it on the show several times, but radiant barrier is almost like it looks like tinfoil with a fiber woven into it. So it's like a very
Mhm.
thick tinfoil that you can't tear. And I started a weatherization company back, I don't know, 15 plus years ago, and we retrofitted a lot of old houses with this radiant barrier. And where it goes in a retrofit situation is on the bottom side of the rafters. So you basically go row
Mhm.
by row. It comes in a 3-foot roll. You go row by row in an attic, and you put it on the bottom of the rafters, and you encapsulate that entire attic on the bottom side of all the rafters. And we would follow up with that with blown-in insulation. And that, like I said, that was before spray foam had come down in price. Now, if you do the spray foam between the rafter cavities, I don't know that radiant barrier would be necessary, but radiant barriers is peanuts in price compared to the spray foam. So if you're wanting to do something yourself, it's totally DIY. And I will say that it works
Mhm.
so well that we would do one side of the attic, and the one side of the attic would cool off. You could feel a temperature difference before you even did the other side. So this stuff works great.
Let me add to that. When you said the cost for it, you can do about 1,000 square feet for under $200.
Big payback on that, and your attic is going to love you for that. So the other item that I was going to mention is just a new HVAC system. Average lifespan on those about 15 years on a good system, but if your HVAC has seen its best days and you're just going to do a new system, I always tell people now's the time to do it, because the energy code requirements keep making the price go up and up. And I think that's some kind of conspiracy between the manufacturers and the people who write the code book. But I want to say the minimum SEER rating is a 16 now. And, for years it was a 13, and eventually it moved up 14, 15. Now it's a 16. And I would advise people to definitely entertain a multi-stage unit. And what the multi-stage unit is, basically, if you have a 4-ton system, it doesn't need to run 4 tons in the spring and the
Mhm.
fall. So you might need 4 tons right now in the hottest part of the summer or the coldest part of the winter. You might need that tonnage, but for the most part, where we live, you do not. So that's a similar concept to a car that has an 8-cylinder engine. It gets on the interstate, downsizes to 6, because that's all it needs. It doesn't require a zoning board. If you want to zone it, you might have a couple $1,000s extra in that, and then maybe $1,000 or so in the multi-stage part, depending on how big the unit is. But I have that in my house. So I have a master bedroom zone, and my son has a zone, and my daughters are on their own zone. And we all, well, as they get older, we live on different schedules. So it
Mhm.
definitely contributes to lower utility bills, because you're not using near what you would need if you didn't have that. So, the lake house that I mentioned, um, gosh, I want to say it's insulated so well, and he has a multi-stage unit, 4-ton unit. I don't think that we've ran more than 2 tons ever, and the cycle time
Wow.
on and off is less than an hour all day long. So it barely runs because it holds heat and cold so well.
And if you have a new system or your system's running fine, be sure to keep it clear of debris and grass and bushes and make sure it has airflow. Of course, we mentioned earlier, have somebody take care of it. We've always talked about having someone keep it maintained, but you can go around it and pull away debris, because blocked airflow on an AC system, that outside unit, is never a good thing. And some people say you can plant trees. That's not going to do much good for quite a while. I would rephrase it. Instead of worrying about planting trees, be aware before you cut one, because it might be giving you more shade
Hmm.
than you realize.
You got my wheel spinning, Eric.
Uh-oh.
We were outside. I thought of 2 things outside the house, and as you were saying that, a couple other things I want to mention. Replacement windows, big ticket item, but the old windows I don't think even qualified for as an R1. One alternative you may get instead of a replacement window is what's called a sash replacement kit. We've done tons of
Hmm.
those, and everybody's been happy with them. Never had anybody tell me they didn't make a big difference, and those are much cheaper than a full-blown replacement window. If you don't have an insulated garage door, my garage faces west, so that low summer sun on the west facing elevation of my house will definitely heat my garage up. So insulated garage door is pretty darn cheap to retrofit or you could just get an entirely new garage door. They're not that expensive. I gave this speech to somebody at a roof inspection this week, but the skylights were all overhauled in 2010. So if your skylights predate 2010, you may consider getting a new skylight. And they have the low E coating, which is kind of like an invisible tint. And they also have the argon gas between the panes to meet the new codes. So I've had people tell me that had skylights in their kitchen. They've told me that we can't even use our kitchen in the summer because it heats it up so much. But all the new skylights solve that problem. And if you needed to retrofit your insulation, I know we mentioned spray foam in the attic, and of course spray foam under a house is easy enough. And a common question I get is, how can I add insulation to my walls? And most insulation companies do what they call drill and fill. So especially if you have siding, that's a possibility, but they can even do it with brick. So I would recommend contacting your local insulation company to get a quote for that. It's not as much as you might think.
I had a friend who bought an old farmhouse, and he did drill and fill himself. He was cutting holes in the side, and he was backfilling it with insulation, and then it was wood siding. He'd take the piece that he cut out, put it back in, and then he caulked it in, or wood caulked it in, sanded it smooth, and then he repainted everything. And he did it himself over a couple months. It was probably not the quality of the pros, but it worked for him. And in the end, it was an old farmhouse. It wasn't like you were going to rip everything off and retrofit it. He was just trying to fill the gaps in between the drywall on the inside of the house and just the clapboard on the side. So there are some people who can do that DIY stuff. I probably wouldn't do it with a modern house. His house was built in like 1910.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. There's ways to do everything, and I guess that just comes down to what makes sense for your house there. But drill and fill is kind of scary, but it can be done.
Yeah. Well, we hope these tips help. Again, you're not going to get a big deduction. There's no way to drop your monthly utility bill by $100 or $200 instantly. But some of those retrofits, considering spray foam insulation, the sash kits, by the way, that Donnie mentioned, the nicer your window, the more expensive that sash replacement kit will be, but it's not rocket science to put them in. And like you said, you don't have to pop off casing and push a whole window out and put one in and make sure it's all set. It's not necessarily a DIY if you don't have experience, but it's not expensive to do.
Yeah.
And it's always a big thing where people are like, wow, this is cool. And it didn't change my framing or anything. And you can also kind of update the look of your window if you're tired of your grid design or something. That's a great time to do that too. But we'll put some details up at the website, thecarolinacontractor.com. And we hope these help out. You can stay cool in the heat. And coming up in the near future, we're going to be interviewing Dennis from Builder Brigade. So keep in tune for that. And of course, look on TV, see if you can find Donnie. It's like, Where's Waldo? You can find Donnie on a television show, 50-50 Flip. And we appreciate you taking time to tune in to today's show. And we hope to catch you next week on the Carolina Contractor Show.
Have a good day, everybody.
Peace. Word to your mother.